Hello and welcome to this fifth video in this little series on the TTI Success Insights psychometric assessments. This series is about building the models, showing you what the models are to give you an insight into what the sciences are and how they can be used and what their value is. So in the first video, we looked at the behavioral model DISC, dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. How we deal with problems and challenges, how we deal with people and contexts, how we deal with pace and consistency, and how we deal with procedures and constraints. And that DISC model gives you 12 behavioral factors. And we typically look at 4 of these behavioral factors being critical in any particular role. Then we looked at motivators or driving forces, why you do what you do, the initiators of action, the initiators of the how, what do you value, what's important to you. And we looked at 6 areas of motivation, each with 2 driving forces to identify the things that engage or disengage you, that you value, that are important to you. Then we looked at competencies, the 25 skills of competencies, and we specifically looked at the top 5 leadership competencies, but we discussed the idea of competency and the role and their importance in development and in development planning. And then we looked at EQ in the last video. In the fourth video, we looked at EQ, the emotional quotient model based on Daniel Goleman's work. And we talked really about the concept of being active in the area of emotional intelligence and how one becomes active in the area of emotional intelligence. And now in this fifth video on the Axiology model, acumen capacity index, defining what one acumen capacity is. And I want to again just build the model and explain the model to you so you have a sense or an understanding of what the science is about. Now you will see from the model that I've already done a little bit of work to get my boxes nice and square. And I want you to imagine the following. I want you to imagine that you are looking at the world and looking at yourself. So let's just look at the world first. Imagine you're looking out at the world, and I want you to imagine you're looking through a window that has 3 panes of glass. And each pane of glass is a different color. So to see clearly what's outside in the world, you need to look through all 3 panes of glass equally in a balanced way. And the word balance is very important here, that you're looking at the world in a balanced way through all 3 panes of glass equally, so that you get white light and you see clearly what's out there. The second important issue when you're looking out at the world, if you want to see it clearly, is that panes of glass, each individual pane of glass is clear. So the whole idea of clarity. For example, if one of the panes of glass is dirty, it doesn't matter if you're looking at the world in a balanced way through the 3 panes of glass. If one is dirty, well, you won't be able to see through it. So in this regard, we're talking about the concept of, in terms of balance, we're talking about when you look at the world, are you looking at it in a balanced way, or are you looking at it in an unbalanced way? And then secondly, how clean or how dirty are the panes of glass? If we're looking in a balanced way and the panes of glass are clean, then we see the world clearly. And if we see the world clearly, we can deal with the world, we can make good decisions, good judgments, we can interact with the world effectively. The exact same principle applies to the self. Are we looking at the self in a balanced way, or are we looking at it in an unbalanced way? And how clean are the panes of glass as we look at ourselves, or how dirty are the panes of glass? What this tool does is it allows you to measure one's capacity for making balanced judgments and decisions based on how clearly one can see oneself and one can see the world, and how clearly as a consequence one can, or how well one can manage one's reaction to the world and to oneself. So when we look at this model, what we're talking about, again, just to give you the theory, we're talking about systemic, extrinsic, and intrinsic. So people, intrinsic, people, extrinsic, things, and systemic, ideas. Or we could say, in terms of systemic, we could say theory. In terms of extrinsic or things, we could say doing. And in terms of people and intrinsic, we could say relationships. Just an example. Looking at ourselves, we're the same. We have systemic, extrinsic, and intrinsic. And systemic, we're talking about one's sense of the future, one's plans for the future, one's sense of direction. Again, it's ideas, it's thinking about the future. Extrinsic is one's roles. What is your role? You understand your different roles in life, your doing. And intrinsic is all about your sense of self. So in this tool, in Axiology, we have the capacity to clearly see how well one understands oneself and the world. And as a consequence, how balanced is one's view, how clear is one, and what kind of judgments and decisions can one make. So we're talking about acumen capacity. Now, for me, this tool is my red flag tool. I use this in high-level recruitment when I'm working with clients particularly. I want to see particular scores. So I'm typically looking for example, 80 to 85% in everything right across the board in all this for senior hire. If I'm getting down to 70%, I'm getting worried. And if I'm getting below that, I'm not interested. Then perhaps there's one exception. I do tend to make an allowance here in the extrinsic on the self, where we're looking at roles. Sometimes when people are in transition, they're not always clear about the role. There might be a little bit of confusion. The score might be a little bit lower there. But what I'm looking for typically, I'm looking for balance. So I'm just going to change the color here just to make the point. I'm looking for balance right across. I'm looking for balance, and I'm looking for high scores, i.e., there isn't a lot of emotional clouding. The emotional clouding is at a minimum, and that people see things themselves and the world as they actually are, and as a consequence can react appropriately and make judgments and decisions that are appropriate. So that is the Axiology model in 101. That's really super simple, but it gives you a good sense of the power of the tool. And just before I finish this, I just want to talk about the integration of the tools. One of the things that we do, and that's really powerful when you use psychometrics, is like a doctor. When you go to a doctor, and if a doctor said to you, you go with a tummy bug, and the doctor will do a blood test, you sort of look at them. Then you go back with a broken leg, and the doctor says to do a blood test, you'd really look at them. You'd want an appropriate tool, like an X-ray for your leg, some other kind of test for your tummy, an MRI for something else, a CAT scan for something else, and so on. You want your doctor to have a suite of tools that he can use or she can use, the appropriate tools in the appropriate way for the appropriate illness. And you want that, and they can do a workup of those. So they can look at 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different tests that they do on you and do a workup and say, this is what each one of these tests is telling me, and now here's what they're all telling me together. One of the strengths of TTI is this idea of multi-science, that there are a suite of sciences, behaviors, motivators, competencies, emotional intelligence, and axiology. A suite of sciences that one can use together in different ways, in different combinations for different purposes to allow you to come up with the best answer. There's a great quote, you all know it, and I apologize for the cliche, but from Peter Drucker from long ago: if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And it's really important when you're using sciences, and that's why I wanted to explain the various models to you, that when you're using science, use the appropriate science, the science that's actually measuring the appropriate thing, and you're measuring in the appropriate way. So think about this in terms of all these sciences that we've looked at: behaviors, DISC, driving forces, competencies, EQ, and axiology, using the appropriate tools in the appropriate ways to get the outcome or result that you want. Now, that's the end of the 5 videos on the 5 sciences. What I'm going to do in the next couple of videos is I'm going to talk about the applications of the sciences, where you can use them, what sciences are appropriate for what things, and what's the best way to use them in different circumstances. So I look forward to seeing you at the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.